As night has now fallen in Ukraine, what we're going to see during the course of tonight are the main elements of the Russian forces appearing and getting ready for battle in Kyiv. And what we've seen so far are light forces with some missiles and aircraft in support. And what's arriving this evening are the tanks, the heavy artillery and the infantry in their armoured vehicles. So we need to have a look at what the battle for Kyiv really means. And on this next map, we begin to see a city 3 times the size of Manchester, home to more than 2.8 million people, which is about to be the subject of a major battle. The Russians will hope very much that they can get their tanks to the presidential palace probably during the course of tomorrow. And the dilemma for the attackers is that if they do this, they are going to have to face stiff Ukrainian military opposition. And the more opposition they face, the more they're going to have to destroy this city and kill civilians in order to make their way into the centre. The dilemma for the defenders is the reverse, in that if they try and hold the Russians on the outskirts, they'll become a much easier target for Russian artillery and air attack and are likely to be destroyed quickly and in a more devastating way. If they allow the Russians to penetrate into the city, they'll have to give ground, they'll feel they're surrendering their city, but they will weaken the Russian ability to use their artillery, tanks and air power, and they'll increase the chances for defeating the Russians piecemeal with 1,000 attacks at any one time from a highly mobilized citizenry. This city is like any modern European city. It has wonderful buildings, high-density population areas, thoroughfares, narrow streets. There is no way you can conduct a battle for Ukraine and seize the capital, Kyiv, without major destruction. And that's the dilemma that we're all facing tonight. But there's more than that. If we go back to a map, we need to understand that the Russians are now at the end of lines of communication back to their sources of supply in Belarus and Russia that are between 150 and 200 miles long. That means that for these length of those roads, Russian trucks are moving fuel, ammunition, spare parts and food into the battle zone. And that presents a very rich array of targets for the Ukrainian opposition. So the Russians have now not just got to fight for Kyiv, they've got to secure these very long lines of communication. The third issue is the battle for the east, which is quite different. And on this next map, you can see that what we're beginning to understand is President Putin's ambition to carve out territory that would connect Russia through Ukraine to the Black Sea. And maybe he is considering annexing that. Now, the challenge is he probably felt that many of the people in this area were Russian-speaking and would welcome a Russian intervention. As we've seen during the course of the day, that is not the case. But the issue that's coming up over the next few days is how much of this area of eastern Ukraine is effectively annexed by Russia. And the fourth thing we need to look at is one of the consequences of the fighting is the flow of refugees. And what we're seeing already are people fleeing mostly Western Ukraine to arrive in NATO countries. So far, we believe around 120,000 have made that journey. And the UN is suggesting that maybe 4 million Ukrainians will want to move. So we may, particularly if that fight for Kyiv becomes as stiff as I've described it could be, we may see millions of Ukrainians leaving Ukraine for NATO, where they'll be grateful for the sanctuary and deeply disappointed at the lack of military support that they've received so far.